Hello, everyone. Welcome to an all new episode of the Indic Paradigm on the Indic Explorer Channel. I'm your host, Vineet. And with me here today, we have a very special guest, Kushal. Welcome to the show, Kushal.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, on this show, we've covered people from different facets of the Indic cultural space and tried to explore the themes of Indic culture and modernity. But I wanted to do this show specifically because I wanted to cover modernity from the Indic sense and the Indic lens itself. So, that is what the subject of today's discussion is going to be. So, Kushal, to lay the context, uh, what is modernity in general and because western modernity काफी हावी रहा है पूरे दुनिया में so what is western modernity and how is indian or indic modernity in contrast with western modernity.
All right. So first of all, I don't know if there will be contrast. So I'll try to explain it in how I perceive it. I actually did a monologue also on this, on my own podcast. So that's there, and where I try to explain where I'm coming from. So I'll try to. So modernity, if you can say, is basically it can be called a process which can be associated with cultural and intellectual movements that spanned all the way back from 1436 to 1970s, and some believe even 1990s for that matter. uh, so you have modernity in the classical western sense is divided into three eras, right? It's the early modernity is basically somebody says 1500 to 1780s or something. Somebody will be very specific, like the traditional historiography is like 1453. They're very nitpicky. So they say 1453, you know. So this is when people start experiencing changes in their life. Then classical modernity obviously is your enlightenment period, which is 1789 to 1900s. Then this is the period where so obviously early 1500s is directly parallel to the invention of the printing press too, and that's when messages started disseminating, and a culmination of that gets into classical modernity. And classical modernity, then you had newspapers, telephones, and many other ways of communication that overall gets into what can be called late modernity. Late modernity is 1900 to 1989. Now, even in that, some scholars like Lyotard and Baudrillard have different views, and others have different views. But largely, modernity is in three phases in the Western sense. Now, it's twofold. There is a historical period, and then in that historical period, what was happening? Your social cultural norms were changing. What were those socio-cultural norms? They were basically norms that were set up in the West, or what is loosely called the West, which had been going on for a certain time with the advent of science through enlightenment. A lot of cherished beliefs, and it's very ironical because they started to believe a lot of these movements started to prove the claims of the Bible, but they eventually went against the Bible. But these people were intellectually honest. They, when it went against the Bible, they still kind of tried to do their mental gymnastics around it, but they still stuck to their guns in that sense. Obviously, the same part of modernity in the West is directly proportional to secularism, which is a major movement in the West. Now here, there are two strands of thought. So one is what is classically called the Thomas Holland strand of thought, which says modernity is, Tom Holland is a historian. Tom Holland basically is a historian in England. So is that uh, modernity is basically an offshoot of Christianity. But that is not the only scholarly thought in the West. There is another very major stream in the West, which I think a lot of Indians inconveniently or for their own convenience ignore and don't like to talk about. That actually modernity in the West and a lot of these secular elements that have come in the West per se are literally because of pagan influences. And so what they are, what is preferably called modernity, and what was basically a challenge to the status quo, was basically a process where pagan influences were being challenged. So a very good source of that, if you want to look at academically, is this book. I can't pronounce the surname of that author, but I'll spell it because I've written it down to spell it, because I just don't know how to pronounce it. So it's basically, the book is Radical Platonism in Byzantium, and it shows how paganism influences certain worldviews in the West, which leads to secularism and modernity. Niketas is the first name of the guy, and now I'm going to read the second name because I had to write it down. Siniossoglou. I am not going to bust my brains in pronouncing his name. This is a very good book. There are many other books. I'm just using one book as an example. So there are two strands over here too, as to why the secularization happened. Obviously, modernity, one of the biggest features of modernity in the West, the bedrock of modernity will be science. So, this entire scientific revolution that happened from the 16th century onwards, you had Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, many others, who started developing new things in physics and astronomy. Many were influenced through India too, or Francis Bacon later on. He talked about new approaches and stuff like that. You had Galilei, Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton, who was deeply influenced by Descartes too. Then you had Francis Bacon, and basically what this was doing was, it was slowly but steadily leading to a systemic challenge to pre-modern beliefs. What were those pre-modern beliefs? Was, let's say, you have the supremacy of the biblical worldview, like Galileo Galilei challenging the status quo at that time, which basically led him to him being arrested or put in a house arrest and stuff like that. So that is, by and large, I mean, I don't want to make it a very long answer. As far as the West is concerned, now, what I called in my monologue, which was basically Hindutva is Hindu modernity, is modernity in India. You know, so where can we draw modernity in India? Now, I would say modernity in India, if I was to say that, basically what is modernity, in the sense that there were certain beliefs, cherished beliefs of that time, that started to be challenged and that started to be questioned. Now, the method does not have to be the same. It doesn't have to be I came up with some scientific theory and that challenged the very belief. I mean, sometimes science leads to change, sometimes just philosophers lead to change. I mean, even in the West, it was not always the change came through the scientists. Sometimes I know Charles Darwin was like a hammer on everything in the Christian belief, but that was their problem. But what modernity basically leads to is, it is a change of status quo. There is an established orthodoxy. There is an established orthodox view in the social realm, and sometimes in the scientific realm also. And that gets challenged. And what are the tools you use to challenge them? So I think the early traces of modernity in India, according to me, can be traced to the Bhakti movement. Now, Bhakti movement, you could say Ravidas, 1450, I think. Kabir, 1398. Namdev, 1270. Nandanar, 8th century, 12th century, depending on which historian you like. रविदास गुरु उत्तर प्रदेश के थे. Then चोखा मिला, Maharashtra. That is your early modernity. So the Bhakti movement comes in. Now, what is the Bhakti movement doing? Whether, see, again, now people may not like to admit it. The Bhakti movement was a response to certain problems in Hindu society. They may not like to admit it, but there were problems. Like I always like to say, there are two people in this world who think the Hindu is a unicorn. One is the extreme left. One is the apologetic Hindu. The unicorn situation is, there is nothing good in Hinduism as per the left. Hindu is a unicorn. Nothing good can happen in a Hindu. And then there is the unicorn non-left, which says there is nothing bad
Nothing
in the
bad.
Hindu. So there are two unicorns. Both agree on one thing: Hinduism is a unicorn situation. None like it. It's so rare.
There's no
So
nuance.
yeah, there is no nuance, and it is apologia. But if you remove that and you look at objectively, the Bhakti movement was a response to certain societal changes. So Jati Varna, as we understood, let's say from the Rigvedic times, and it's to its journey, and the genetic data backs it up. I mean, people may not like it, but what do you do if India was becoming endogamous more and more and more and more? And if you look at the overlapping of this, okay, so we know the highest peak of endogamy in Indian society starts at around 500, you know, 500, the year 500. And if you look at it in 1,000 years, Bhakti movement is fully functional and is basically challenging these strands of Indian society. Now, what else do we call it? I mean, in fact, we should be celebrating we were the first modernists. To be very honest, we started modernity.
Earlier.
Even if you look at early modernity from the Western standards, I mean, if we, if I can point to say Namdev, Namdev and his work is in 1270, and the first strands of modernity are in 1440, 1450 onwards in the West. So we were actually challenging our orthodoxy way before they actually even thought of it. What we should be studying is, did Hindu modernity influence Western modernity? We should be trying to study that, but we are denying the entire process itself in India, which is very interesting to me personally. So we can say we have early modernity in that sense. Then you have the next level of modernity, which is maybe, the starts in the 1800s with Brahmo Samaj, Arya Samaj, Hindu Mahasabha. You have obviously the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. All these movements start coming up. And there are others, obviously. You have Jyotirao Phule, Jyotiba Phule. There are multiple movements. But what I'm trying to say is, now you are in the mature phase of this. Now, what we don't have in India is the late phase of modernity, according to me. We don't have that in India. Now, somebody might be coming to me and naturally saying, but why is not there? And that's where I think there is a huge difference between India and what happened in the West. Is the West industrialized? We are not an industrial society. I think by and large, we are still a very pre-industrial society. See, the cognitive flips that happen because of industrialization in a mind, they are not sufficiently there in India. In fact, we have missed the industrial bus in a very major way. And second is urbanization. Are we urbanized enough? Now, I don't think so. India is urbanized enough also. So what happened in the West was urbanization and industrialization happened parallelly. In the case of India, it has happened, but it is not sufficient. And I think that is the key difference area. Our early modernity was clearly 100 to 200 years before the West. But then we just stagnated for multiple reasons. And I think I'm willing to accept the fact that I think the Islamic invasion of India really stagnated our society. So the deep roots of early modernity could not be taken to the next level, because the society just kept on becoming more and more and more and more and more dogmatic and endogamous, which just led to people living in silos. Obviously, you need more anthropological research on this. But then comes the British colonial phase, and then new elite class is created. Let's just be very clear, this was a new elite class, and they were like, okay, we will use British education and we'll try to reform our society. Now different people are different ways. Now one strand of society might think Brahmo Samaj was too colonized. That's their view, and they are entitled to their view. Now now Sri Aurobindo had a very different take. Now somebody might think, even Sri Aurobindo, why'd we colonize? For them, maybe Sri Aurobindo is not enough also. But my point is that these people were all educated in the English system, but they were also trying to change in their own way. Like if you read the volumes and speeches of Swami Vivekananda and his critical analysis of what ails the Hindu society, or the most famous thing when it comes to, I think, modernizing the Hindu mind, is the seven shackles of Savarkar. I mean, Savarkar is quite well known. I mean, I think nobody understood the problem of Hindu society better than Savarkar. So, in my view, this is how I would present what in general is known as modernity, and what I conceive of what is happening in India in modernity.
Right. Uh, Also, Kushal, because when we talk about modernity, there's one other concept that one needs to understand, which is this idea of a conception of a golden age, right? Like, what is a golden age of a society, and what should even define a golden age? Like, because there's always this thing that uh, even in modernity, I see a lot of people from the Indic side try to look at a certain phase of our history as the golden, especially the Gupta period, or which depending on which where you are and all of that. uh, how do you see that, simply because and how much of revisiting the past should stop only at revisiting it, but also analyzing it for the present and the future? Because that is something that we are kind of struggling with, right? Because just going to the past isn't good enough. How does it inform our today is also equally important, which is a little bit lacking.
Yeah, but my see, I have never understood what is a golden age. Like, why is it a golden age? What is so golden about it? And golden age for whom is my second question. You see, it's
Correct.
a very important question. Was it a golden age for the Shudras? I'm asking a genuine question. I don't know. I'm asking. Was it a golden age for women? I don't know. I have my doubts. So golden age based on what? What are see? It's very interesting that people who call it the golden age never explain why it is a golden age. If you ask me what is the golden age of India, this is the golden age.
Correct.
This is the golden age of India because we are objectively better in most parameters than the past. That's my way of looking at it. And now somebody will be like, how do you know? Well, first you decide golden age is based on what? My golden age is based on human flourishing. And human flourishing on the basis of what parameters, right? You can judge in terms of accessibility to products, accessibility to other things in the realm of social life, accessibility to human rights. I mean, did we even have conceptualization of human rights at that time or stuff like that? So, I mean, what golden age? In fact, this is, I to call it the golden age syndrome. It's a problem. It's not a it's not a see. I say this line which irritates many people. People with a pathetic present create an imaginary past. Everybody does it, by the way. India is not unique. Again, I'm not trying to show India as some unique thing. By the way, some weirdos in the West also do it. Even today, they have this
Oh,
imaginary golden age. They go to a golden age. My point is very simple. Golden age in what sense? Why do we call it the golden age? I have, if your point is you should study the past, yes, I am also a humble student of the past. I think we should learn from the past. Whatever good practices they had, we should take it. I think when it comes to our ancestors, I think they were much more in sync with the environment than us. We are not. So there they might be definitely better than us. But I think in treatment of women, we are better than them. I think in treating everybody equally, we are better than them. I think we are far better than them. They were not. And now people
correct.
may not like this again, what I'm saying, but that's just a fact. That's a fact of life. I mean, how do I know? I can point out to verse after verse in every religious text of every religion, cutting across religions. Every religion does it in differing degrees. Some do it more, some do it less. That I accept. But when we are talking about this, should we study our past? Absolutely, we should, because we should learn the best practices of our ancestors and we should learn the worst practices of our ancestors. And we should make sure we don't commit the worst, and we should make sure we always stick to the best. Like, I think the best practices from our ancestors, like someone like Bhagwan Sri Krishna and his lesson of Nishkam Karma. If I wish every Indian followed Nishkam Karma today, unfortunately, Indians don't. Bhagwan Shri Krishna gave us the best lesson to live our life with, but we don't listen to him. We only take the bad from our past. We don't take the good from our past. So in that sense, so for me, I don't understand when people talk about a golden age, because I genuinely, in my heart, don't believe there is a golden age. I genuinely believe that today, the world we live in, yes, India has so many problems, but I don't want to be going back to the Gupta period and being born there. If somebody put me in a time machine and said, Kushal, would you like to go back to any particular time in India and live at that time with those human beings? My categorical answer is no, I don't want to go back to anybody's era. I have no interest in going back. I am very happy in current India with all its problems.
Yeah. Kushal, you mentioned a very interesting point, and I want to delve a little deeper in that. From whatever you've told me on the Bhakti movement, as well as the Bengali Renaissance, which is the starter of the next version of the Indic modernity, uh, all the modernity seems to be focused on socio-cultural, philosophical, religious, those realms. but not so much on the material realms, right? And why do you think that has been the case? Because can modernity be fulfilled without industrial and general economic growth? Like, I'm just, questioning that hypothesis because that part is just missing. Because those cultural changes have to impact societal thinking towards prosperity also, right? Like, why has that not happened?
Well, the biggest reason of that not happening was colonization of India. I mean, the Britishers really were mercantilists who sucked the living daylights out of us. What did they give back to us in return? Now, whether you look at Paul by Roque's work or you look at Angus Madison's work, it is pretty clear that basically the mercantilists, they were not capitalists, right? They were mercantilists. The Britishers, they were mercantilists and they sucked the lights out of us. Now, if they're going to suck the lights out of us, I mean, where was the chance? And another interesting peculiarity that developed in India, and I'm going to use this example of the Chinese to explain these patterns because I think that could lie in the answer you're seeking. So I was reading this book. I'm very bad with names, so I have forgotten again. It was a book on the history of laws. I don't remember the author's name. So it basically traces the history of laws, how laws came, and how this focus from groups to individuals happened, basically, and how actually pretty much the Indians and the Chinese, these were all the original proto lawmakers. Like the most robust examination system of the world ever made was by the Chinese, and
The
basically the
Confucian
world,
class.
yeah. So from the 1300s onwards, they built this examination system. And so in the 1700s, when the Europeans had their industrial revolution, they took these tools to the Chinese and they told the Chinese, here, free me, take it. And the Chinese said, heh, and they did not take it. Now, can you see the parallels in India? When you become intellectually isolationists, when you refuse to learn from others, see, when you reach a peak as a society, you reach a level of, I don't know, to use a proper Indian word, tamas, an intellectual tamas. And that intellectual tamas leads you to think that the other is either a malech or intellectually inferior to you and has nothing good to offer. And I don't know how else to say it. We just missed the bus. We were too arrogant. We missed the bus and we refused to learn. And it is only when our scholars learnt under the British and realized, oh, दुनिया तो बदल गई भैया. अगर हमने अपने आप को नहीं बदला तो हम और पीछे हो जाएंगे. We have to change with time. And this is why it just took time. It took us time. And I'm not saying if the British would not have come, we would not have done it independently, unlike a lot of people in the Indian left who insinuate that it is because the British came,
Yeah,
it happened. I mean, I say, sorry, please side ho jao, tum log, pagal logo tum log. It is impossible that we would have avoided it, because even if the British would not have invaded us and they would have invaded the rest of the world, they were such a powerful behemoth that we could not have ignored it. We had to accept it. So
correct.
I think the reason is, with our society becoming highly endogamous and it leading to intellectual endogamy of some weird sort, where we just refuse to look at outside world for ideas, we just miss the urbanization and the industrialization bus. And significantly at that time we were being ruled also, na. हम लोग, so they were taking things out but barely give, that pathetic, अरे they gave us railways. अरे इतना पैसा लेने के बाद ट्रेन तो दे देगा.
And that also, it's not a favor. It was for extractive
Yeah.
purposes. It was just collateral
Yes.
benefit that they built the infrastructure. They weren't doing it to help us or something like that. Like, I just don't
Yeah.
understand that.
Yeah, it's such a ridiculous argument that, अरे they gave us railways.
Postal
अरे they gave
service.
us the Bengal famine also, यार.
That's too high a cost to pay for that service.
Yeah.
Like,
एक काम करो, बंगाल फेमिन वापस दे दो, ट्रेन लेके चले जाओ, हम लोग बना लेंगे. See, this is the point I'm trying to make. So internal analysis में I think Jati Varna, endogamy, and our lack of interaction between our society, which was also extenuated. By the way, I fully concede this fact that the hardlining of our endogamy also happened because of the British influence on our society and their weird surveys and their weird way of looking at us. I am not denying that at all. But the point is, I am denying the claim of the non-left that it only happened because of them and everybody was just holding hands and singing Kumbaya. If that was the case, then what the hell was Namdev doing in 1270? Yaar? What was he fighting against? I mean, are we going to lie that all these people, whether Choka Mela or Namdev and all the other names that I did, what were their bhajans about? What was their social commentary about? What were they basically doing? They were fighting the castists of that time. So that, I think, led to this problem in my view. But am I 100% right? Oh, hell no, I'm not confident about it. There could be multiple reasons, but I'm not smart enough to come up with all the answers. And I'm honest enough to admit that.
Right. And I mean, obviously, they kind of used existing fault lines and accentuated that, but it would be like not right to say that they caused all of that. So
Yeah.
that's definitely there, but also in a very different contrast, Kushal, since you mentioned about this mental isolation, Japan was a extremely isolationist society, like to foreign influences. Yet there were certain phases in their time period where they would open up, and they would open up, take the knowledge, from the West without losing their culture. Like, the whole development of guns, they learned gun making from the West, and now they perfected gun making to such an extent that they were able to better the Portuguese and the Dutch itself, right? They reverse engineered and did things, and then they again closed. Like, despite being, in fact, they were more isolationist than India as well. At least we used to trade with the outside world, right? They didn't do that for certain phases. They literally had to be forced into it. But they were still able to take knowledge from outside and kind of build on that, which is quite a contrast. I mean,
Because
somehow.
because they were expansionists, we were not. They had that expansionist streak in them. They wanted to rule others. We lost our streak, boss. We lost our streak completely. And just one more point I want to add on your point about the British exploiting our fault lines. I totally agree. I'll give you an analogy. See how convenient the discourse in India is in the left and the non-left. The left will always say the British created the caste fissures because the caste fissures existed. The non-left will completely deny that there is negationism. Similarly, the left denies one thing in India, that the British also created a major role in the creation of Pakistan because there existed Hindu and Muslim tensions also. It was not like the British created the artificial Hindu Muslim tension. Hindu Muslim tensions existed, and they existed from day one. But look at the fascinating negationism in Indian discourse. The left will deny the Islam part, and the non left will deny the caste part. There are two parallel negationisms happening in India. The non left will never accept that the caste fissures existed. These are all British constructs. And which British construct is? The Hindu Muslim enmity is a British construct, as per the left. We were all, dancing in the aisles and singing. The British came and suddenly ruined us selectively, Swad Anusar. So that's the thing. But on the Japanese thing, I think what you have to remember is, unlike us, we lost our expansionist streak. They never lost it. I don't know why we lost our expansionist streak. I guess, the Mughal rule. But even at that time, the Vijayanagar Empire existed. Even when Akbar was at his peak, the Vijayanagar Empire existed. But we still were not expansionist even at that time. So I don't know why we are not expansionist. That is one answer even I'm looking for. If somebody else has an answer for it, maybe. Because I think we were expansionists. That's why we spread to Cambodia and so many other places. I mean, Angkor Wat is what? I mean, कोई तो हमारे यहाँ से वहां गया होएगा ना, तो ही तो वो लोग हिंदू हुए, नहीं तो बने कैसे हिंदू? यहाँ से कोई तो उधर गया होएगा. But how come we stopped? Why we stopped? I honestly, even it baffles me too.
Yeah, that's true. Uh, you have a very interesting point which you mentioned, that you believe in the Krishna's value of ahimsa, right? Like, which is the non-aggression principle, kind of. Uh, so what do you like? Do you see that as a very important pillar on which, like, how do you see that informing into the values of how do we handle diversity, diverse views of any kind, right? How do you, what do you think about that in terms of being plural versus being secular and all of that? So, how do you think that can inform that?
You see, first of all, in India, we have completely misunderstood what secularism is. I don't know what the hell is going on in India. We have the most bastardized version of secularism on planet Earth in India. And Indians are unique creatures. I have never met anybody in America or Canada who comes to me and says, I am secular, you are communal. This is hilarious. Only Indians do this weird word salad. It's a word salad. How can you be secular? You can be a secularist. That I accept. Like, I am a secularist. That I understand. What is I am secular? Are you a blank slate? Like, तुम्हारे दिमाग में कुछ नहीं है? See, we have a very stupid discourse. Pluralism is not secularism. Pluralism is your ability to respect diversity of points. Secularism is a very simple construct that the state will not look at anybody as a group. Primarily, they will look at you as individuals. It will not discriminate against any individual, and it will, if certain groups and it will not discriminate against any groups because of any immutable characteristics jisko bolte hain. In India, even caste has become an immutable characteristic, unfortunately, now because of the way our system has been structured. But otherwise, you know the deal: your skin color, race, stuff like that, gender, sexuality, kind of a thing, sexual preferences. So the point is that, see, as far as Krishna's principle is concerned, well, it's a very logical principle, right? I always call it the no first strike policy principle. Like, sometimes even there is an exception to that. Like, sometimes you have to strike someone. For example, if I am seeing a a man molesting a young kid, now he's not harming me, he's harming a kid, but I will drop my principle, right? I will first call the cops. But if I can't get hold of the cops and that man is raping that young kid, I will go and strike that man. I will drop my Krishna's principle. But in general, I'm not going around beating people up. But if they attack me, I have every right to defend myself. So that's how I look at Krishna's principle. That's my explanation for
I
that.
think the only place where we apply that is our nuclear policy. I think
Yeah.
apart from that, I don't think we are doing that. But you mentioned a very interesting point on the role, of the state and the individual. And where do you think, because this is a very constant discussion that happens between in the Indic wing, especially on what should be the primacy of the community or the collective, and any form of community, any voluntary association of individuals, right? uh, versus the individual. And where do you think this, this modernity question, where do you think it's, how do you think it's going to answer this issue, and where will be the role of the state? So individual, community, and state.
See, the state is going to be there in the individual and the community both. But there is only one line, unfortunately, in India where nobody does any practice, whether done by an individual or by a collective, does it violate the harm principle? It's very simple. I don't care. You can have 5,000 different groups in India, 5 million different groups in India. I only care about one thing. My question to everybody who wants to put group rights over individual rights is very, very simple. I ask just one question. What is the group rights argument? There are 500 groups. You can have 501 group. But 501 has no business telling what practice the other 500 are doing is right or wrong. That is the argument of the group rights focus. I am not straw manning them. I am steel manning them. That is what they literally say. You can go and check their videos. My point is, what if one of those 500 has a practice like bachabazi? We should allow that or what? It's a very genuine question, right? So are you saying bachabazi should be allowed? What if one of those groups has a practice of when a child is born? I'm creating a hypothetical. Now you can say it's a straw man, but it's not. That's how arguments are done. When a child is born, if it's a girl, I will cut one finger off. Should the state interfere or not? Should the state interfere or not? Okay, not even cutting one finger off. Should the state not interfere if the girl child gets married at the age of 15, which literally happens in India, by the way? This literally happens in India. Why should the state not interfere? जाने दे, उनकी problem है. I can't. I can't live in a society like that. The group right size says that is their problem. They should look at it. Now, I don't believe in that view, because do we all believe in human flourishing or not? Now, if somebody says it's not your business whether they flourish or not because you are not part of that group, literally assumes that you are a group first and individual second. I believe I'm an individual first, a group second. I am an individual first, and once you become a republic, and what is the end goal if everything is a group rights focused? Then why are we a nation state? Why bother? My question is, why bother then? Then let's have a jati clan based society. Every jati has its own nation. Every jati will jostle with another jati. Every religion will jostle with another religion. Let us have a fluid society. Let us stop this drama of constitution itself. Na? And let's
And the
go
most
back to that old
important thing there
society.
is that the nation itself is a collective, and that itself has to be held to a standard, right? I mean, if one group is not, like, if there is some difference or if there is an issue, if even if you take the community rights argument, the nation as a community is the biggest community. So what about, the nation's flourishing, right? It's
Yeah,
everybody's
but
business.
that's exactly, you have put it so beautifully. I have to commend you for this, because that is the exact problem with the group rights argument. Because if you want to make it a micro group and not a larger collective, because there is no collective, right? Because if there is a collective, there is only one kind of collective. But the point is that take the argument to its end goal. If this is your focus and this is how you want the country to be, then there is no nation. India itself collapses, because then we are just looking at selfish motives of different groups doing different things, and literally nothing ties you. Today, you're tied together in an artificial construct that we have all agreed on. I know human rights are a myth. Nobody needs to tell me that. Similarly, group rights are also a myth. I just want to remind others of that. People who believe group rights are real and human rights are myths, individual rights are myths. No, they're all myths. We are just discussing which myth is better. That's the whole point. Which is the way which will lead to the maximum human flourishing, not group flourishing. Human. See, the beauty of society, and I would say, a great thing that our ancestors had, which I don't know what has happened to us today. The West was, the West was narrow, and then they kept on expanding the moral arc. We were narrow but open at the same time because of our pluralism. We want to go and close that pluralism. The moral arc should expand. See what happens when the moral arc expands? We develop compassion and altruism beyond our tribe. Beyond our tribe, we go to the larger area. From the city, we go to the nation state. From the religion, we go to other religions. Then we go to other species. Now, beauty of our society was we always were like that to the environment, and we become sensitive to many things. My point is that this group rights focus actually completely reverts the way we should be living our life. If human flourishing is your focus, then how does it matter? Human is human, right? कोई भी group का हो, क्या फर्क पड़ता है? But no, it is not about human flourishing. It is basically the see, the fear is that modernity will harm certain cherished rituals and practices of the certain groups. But why would it harm? Why would it harm if it does not violate the harm principle? Why would it? Or if you believe in your views so much, at least then you admit you're a moral relativist and a moral subjectivist, and you genuinely don't believe in any objective moral standards. Christian women in India, I don't know how many people know, Christians have the worst divorce laws in India, by the way, worse than Muslims, FYI. I mean, it's even harder to get divorced as a Christian woman than a Muslim woman.
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so please check Christian divorce laws in India and get enlightened. It is so much fun to read it. I mean, you'll bang your head on the wall. And after reading all of this, and if somebody comes in, it is not your job to reform them. Huh? Why is it not my job? Why is it not part? Why is your empathy and sympathy so clan based? This is my question to you. How can you be so clan based in your thinking that there this is just happening to anybody anywhere? It's not. As far as the ritual aspect is concerned, I am completely with the group right side when the state government decides what is the dahi handi pyramid height going to be. I am with them there. That is an assault on their freedom. I am with them there. On Shabrimala, I was with the group right side because Shabrimala was a clear case. The rules and regulations that are set by the book were not based on women are impure. Because if women are impure, then no women would be allowed. No, I mean, it is not rational. Their story is not rational. Well, I am a materialist. I don't think a belief in God is also rational beyond a point. That means what? I will now tell the courts of India to ban everything. Am I crazy? The courts were wrong there. Our courts were wrong in Shabrimala. These are different things. You have to go case by case, and that's why I said you only have one measurement criteria. Does it violate the harm principle? Now somebody will come and say harm principle is a Western idea. So, I mean, so it is Western, big deal, zippity doodah. I mean, I don't know.
But sometimes this goes a little too far when they say even rationality is a Western, like everything is then a Western idea. Like, don't
Yeah.
even look at any other, like, we would have had facets of these thoughts in our, history as well. But no, that has come from the West. Like,
Yeah, and see, even if something has come from the West, I don't know how people don't want to admit it. The internet came from the West. Most of the technologies that we are losing right now, I hate it to break it to them. Your Indic person did not invent electricity. Electricity that basically powers everything came from the West. If you have so many problems with the West and you want to get rid of all Western influences in your life, then hey man, you gotta live like the Amish do in the West. Those people are truly living that life. वो घोड़ा गाड़ी में घूमते हैं, घोड़े पे जाते हैं, उनके घर में लाइट नहीं होती है. They have no modern influences on them. So you want to see a pre-modern life? You actually can see it in the United States of America and Canada. You have to go and see the Amish.
truly the recreation of the golden age.
Yes, golden age. Jao, Jilo, golden age. I mean, I don't get it, man. I see beyond a point. I don't like, look, I totally understand that I concede the Dahi Handi argument. I concede the Diwali argument. I concede the argument that the Indian judiciary is deeply Abrahamized. I concede that. But that doesn't mean Western Christian secular equal to bad. First of all, Western and secular is pagan. So be happy about it. So first I disagree with you over there itself. And even if it is Christian, I'm just giving, what if Christianity had a good idea? Are you that intellectually isolationist? Here is your answer of why we did not take many things. It's an intellectually isolationist way of looking at the world. You
And
should be saying,
even the West, they are taking yoga. I mean, obviously they're divorcing it from the religious philosophical aspects and they are internalizing
yeah,
it within their system. So they are
and we should
also
fight
taking
against that.
exactly, but they are doing that, right? They are showing the capability of taking it very flexibly into their system. So why should we not take anything from their system, even if there is something?
Yeah, and this is where I love Rajiv Malhotra's concept of cultural digestion. He's like, cultural appropriation is fine. Currently you and I are also culturally appropriating the West by wearing their clothing. This is not
Yeah,
our clothing. Let's be very clear. It is their clothing. Appropriation is fine, but we don't call this Angavastra. We called it shirt. We did not change the name, but they took our Vipassana and they called it mindfulness. They took our Yoga Nidra and they called it lucid dreaming. They took our pranayam and they called it what, something breathing or something. So that is my problem. Why did they do that? That is where we need to fight, that they remove the roots. But that doesn't mean we become crazy na. See, wherever you, the West is so smart, they are taking all our good things and they are removing the traces. We like dummies don't want to take their good things because, oh, they colonized us. Arey baba, so what? They colonized us. As if we did not do any bad things in our life. Everybody has done bad things. We have to mature sometime, right? If we want to become a intellectual and economic powerhouse, do you think our solution of becoming an intellectual and economic powerhouse is literally calling science a Western construct? Because let me tell you, there is a strand which is post-colonialism in the West, which literally says science is white supremacy. They do. It is a strand. And there are offshoots in India. Both are based on postmodernism. And both these ideas basically lead to nihilism. That's all it is. There is no good or bad. There is no objective standard. There is nothing. जिसको जो करना है करो. ठीक है? So this is what happens when you have a group focus, when you shift the individual to the group and everything is from the group lens. I mean, look, my whole point is best of luck to the people who want to live like that. I refuse to live in that society. That's my point. I want to live in the society where there are group rights, but the focus has always got to be the individual within that group too. यार नहीं तो हम लोग जिएंगे कैसे? ये किस किस्म की लाइफ है?
Right. There's another very interesting issue to consider. How much should modernity be a break from the past? So, because I'll tell you why I'm asking you this question. Because Indian modernity, at least from the examples that you've told me, both the Bhakti movement and the Renaissance from the 19th to 20th century, uh, it seems to be change with incremental steps, change with continuity, right? I'm not sure how Western modernity is. I think it's far more transformative, right? There is, like, if there is some break from the past, I think they've been able to adopt that as well, right? In new ideas which are completely new. So, how much do you think that, do you think change with continuity is a good thing or a bad thing? And should we be also ready for transformative change if something new comes up?
I think we should be very careful in every time we try. This is where conservatism has a very good argument. I think why conservatism has a very good argument in that sense is the conservatism is what it is trying to conserve old practices, because I think this hyper modernist view of trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater has led to absolute chaos in the West, and we should learn from the mistakes of the West. They threw religion out. They basically became an absolutely godless society, and religion is right back in Western society in the form of wokeism. We should be very careful in not falling for the Western trap. Religion has some good aspects, and this is coming from my mouth who does not believe in any divinity. But I see religion has some good aspects to it. We should we should totally keep and preserve our past. The only things of the past that need to be rejected are the ones that break the harm principle. That's all. That's all I'm interested in. Like, people sometimes accuse me, oh, you say you want annihilation of Jati Varna. Do you think I genuinely in my solid brain think it is going to happen? I know it's not going to happen. It will go on diluting. Why? Because we'll go on urbanizing. Unlike to the chagrin of many people, we're going to go on modernizing. So Jati Varna will dilute. It will never be annihilated. It will be diluted till the extent that your Jati identity is. But as long as you don't violate the harm principle, keep the things from the past. Keep your rituals from the past. Does your ritual violate the harm principle? That's my interest. If it doesn't, I could care less. I think it is a good thing. Rituals are needed. I mean, even यार क्रिकेट की टीम जाती है फील्ड पे, वो लोग भी हडल करते. हडल है क्या यार? Huddle is a ritual. It's a clear case of getting you mentally attuned to a common goal. It is as evolutionary as it gets. Rituals are there. It is all part of human beings trying to cope with their existence in a post-agricultural society. The West tried to throw religion. Look what they got. So I am not for throwing religion. Indian modernity should not be like Western modernity. Please stay away from them. They are dangerous, crazy people. We need to have our own modernity, but we need modernity, na? We need some semblance of improvement in our quality of life. Like, are we trying to give an argument that women should only stay at home? Uh, if they want to, they can. But what if they want to do a job, yeah? Should they be allowed or not? Is my argument. Not, are you, I mean, why is this so bad? This is also Western according to some people. So there has to be some balance, is all I'm saying. I'm not for destruction of the past. Preserve the past, which is where the conservatives are right. But don't keep the bad things. I mean, get rid of some baggage also, no, at the same time.
Right. Also, Kushal, you mentioned that some of the smaller identities will dilute but will not go away. I want to ask you a little bit more on that because in Europe, right, especially 18th, 19th century, there were feudal classes. There were the three estates and all of that. They had their own hierarchies. In the United States, also, you had immigrants from different parts of the world: German immigrants, French, etc., etc. And I'm sure you would know about the book where how the Irish became white, the Jews became white, the Italians became, like, if you see that,
Brodkin was the author. Karen Brodkin.
the whole identity question is expanding constantly and it's not diluted. Eventually it just goes off. Do you think any of those things, sociological phenomenons, can happen in India in that
It's
way
going to
or that?
happen. It's going to happen whether we like it or not. See, I in fact even mentioned this once. Not that I want it to happen. I just said, yes, many Kula Devatas will go, but many Ishta Devatas will come. Many Ishta Devatas will go, but many new Kula Devatas will come. You just have to live with it. I am not saying it is a good thing or a bad thing. It is happening. What do you want to do, yaar? You can't. मतलब परिवर्तन ही संसार का नियम है, ये हमारे पूर्वजों ने ही कहा था ना.
Yeah. And I mean, in most pagan traditions, some city state god comes up suddenly when the city's fortune goes up, and some other gods, like, it keeps happening all the time, right?
Yeah,
Even in
I agree with
Hinduism,
you.
it's happened with Indra worship and Agni and, Brahma, it's worship disappearing almost.
Abhi read the Rig Veda, look at the status of Indra in the Rig Veda, and then compare it to the status of Indra in the Ramayana, and then do the Mahabharata, and then do the Puranas. Is Indra's status changing or not? But the fact is, Indra was far more important in the Rig Veda. Is anybody going to deny that? I mean, I have read it, so I know. Everybody knows the placement of Indra as a Deva, as the, as a premier Deva there, as a deity there, is much higher. It changes. So you are spot on. I 100% agree with you. But I mean, at least the modernists did not do that. It happened by itself. Now somebody will come back and say, but Indra is still there. Baba, magar there are so many other deities, they are all not there, na.
Agni, Varuna, Mitra, like, so many deities.
Yeah,
almost completely disappeared.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, completely disappeared. So what are you going to do? I mean, it's not my fault. It was not like I was born at that time going around telling people, oh, change this, change this. I did not do it. It just happens. People make it sound as if, Arey baap re, ye ho jayega. Arey, just think about it. We get attached to so many things. Just think about it. Human beings were not speaking the same way 100 years ago. Then 100 years before that, they were not speaking. Our language keeps changing. So why do you think there is so unique about your Devi Devtas that they will not keep changing in the pecking order of life? Language changes. I mean, imagine, do you think 50 years down the line, the kids are going to speak like us? They're not. So what are we going to sit and cry? Those were the days when we used to say, I mean, what's the point?
पिछले 20 साल में डिजिटल लैंग्वेज और क्या क्या लिंगो आ गया है, मतलब.
हाँ, तो फिर क्या करोगे यार? मैं वही तो बोल रहा हूँ. मतलब नहीं, हम इसको पॉज कर देंगे. अरे पॉज कर ही नहीं सकता भाई. तेरी ना औकात है ना तेरे हाथ में है. तू क्या कर सकता है? तू तेरे बिलीफ्स को क्लिंग ऑन कर. और बस, और तू लोगों को बोल तेरे पंथ में कि वो क्लिंग ऑन करे, किसने रोका थोड़ी ना है. See, the problem is they themselves don't want to do it, and then they cry about it.
I want to ask you something, and I have another hypothesis. Do you think that the Sampradayic system is a much better way to organize a Hindu society? In the sense that it's a marketplace of Sampradayas. So I'll tell you how it is. Yudhishthir, I think, in one of the Yaksha Prashnas, he actually, when he's asked, how should someone choose their belief or something like that? I'm summarizing broadly. He says that if somebody is born in a certain Sampradaya, they should follow it first. And let's say they don't find it a right fitment for their personalities or gunas, they should then seek out a different guru from a different Sampradaya, which is a right fitment for them, and then move into that Sampradaya. Do you think Sampradayic system as a way to ground communities, because completely dismantling communities is not practical, like you said, right? It leads to very different ideologies. But do you think Sampradayic system is a good way of organizing society or
Yeah, there are
modern
different.
society?
See, sampradayas also keep changing, right? There were the old style sampradayas. Now, do you think Manchester United clubs are also modern day sampradayas? They have their own rules, regulations.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They are not.
But I
They are
mean in
not.
the more religious, philosophical, Sampradayic sense. Like I know what you
Yeah,
mean, but
see, sampradayas are communities basically.
correct,
Communities with rules and regulations. Right.
correct,
That's the definition. Communities with do's and don'ts, purity and pollution, rules and regulations.
correct.
Right.
But slightly
I
more of a marketplace of Sampradaya, like where you can at least
Yeah.
flexibly move.
So I will tell you what is the difference between an older Sampradaya and a Manchester United club. You don't get that feeling of wow. And that's where religion is very important. And that's where all the new atheists are wrong. They're all wrong. They don't understand it. Because new atheists have privilege. They have religious privilege. They live in a religious society where the structure is religious. And they don't understand. They only see the problems created by religion. They don't see the good things created by religion. They do not realize the entire kainat is based because of that. So in that, your question basically is, now that we have established religions have good things to offer, which way should we structure a society, the
Correct.
monotheistic way or the dharmic way? That am I trying to understand
Yes.
you correctly?
Correct. Correct. Correct.
Yeah. Then my answer is the dharmic way is much better, because that leads to less destruction. Because what happens is the elite hypothesis exists, right? When you place everything in the monotheistic way, then there is one elite, right? That God, that prophet. And if that God, that prophet gets disproven, the entire hypothesis is collapsed.
Correct.
In our decentralized way, if we keep on trying this, something or the other will keep popping up. So I think this is a much better way.
Right. And like there's another thing in the sense that what should be the conception of how Indian, like for example, America has the great American dream, like the place in the hill where you're free and you can pursue whatever you want and all of that. What do you think a great Indian dream should look like, in the sense that, do you think, like I see it in two ways, and you can tell me what you think about this. One is a common sense of a dharmic high culture, which needs to be created as we go. And second is economic prosperity. Both those two things put together. Do you think that could be one, or do you think there's some other way also that this can be conceived?
So I think these are prerequisites you absolutely need. For me, we are a continuing civilization. So our experience is different from the West. The West had to show they were exceptionalists because they were colonizers. They were colonialists. So they had to show their exceptionalism.
Oh,
Right? हम किसको बता रहे हैं हम एक्सेप्शनल है? हम तो हैं ही यहाँ. हम अपने आप को थोड़ी ना बोलेंगे अरे मैं कितना बड़ा तोप हूं. हम तो अपने ही रह रहे हैं. Now, what we need to focus on, and where people like myself and Harsh Madhusudan Gupta are mocked, is because we are true universalists. We want the world to be dharmic. Yes, we are expansionist dharmics. Both Harsh and I, we are both expansionists. We want the world to become dharmic. We want the world to become how we are, Sampradayik. We want the world to look at this offer. So, in that sense, I believe the biggest message that we need to give to the world is that here is a civilization which did not believe in diversity in the sense of, you know, there is a black guy, there is a white guy, there is a brown guy, there is a yellow guy, there is a pink guy, there is a blue guy, but they all think the same. There are different people, similar looking people, they all think differently. And if you are able to be accepting of epistemic diversity, that's a better system. And this is where, like I said, epistemic diversity subject to harm principle, always there. Subject to harm principle is the caveat in all my arguments. Otherwise, somebody will say anything goes. No, 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 nothing. Yeah. So that way, I think India's message to the world is that if we could take Nishkam Karma, mix it with Anekantvad, and then give it the robust system of the gurus, the Sikh gurus, and the middle path of Buddha, and come up with a khichdi where the outer veneer is Charvak, which is materialist, hedonist, capitalist, economics. तुम्हारी इकोनॉमिक्स वहां आती है. बेसिकली वो अर्थ में आता है ना.
हाँ.
चारवाक अर्थ में मानता था basically. So we need a bit of everything. And if we can take basically, again, to use Rajiv Malhotra coined such a beautiful word, man. That man created such a beautiful book in 2010, Being Different. He said that the West suffers from difference anxiety. That's a beautiful word. We don't suffer from difference anxiety. We are actually very comfortable with difference. And I think that is our message to the world. Our message to the world is, because we don't suffer from difference anxiety, we demand mutual respect. And maybe in that sense, we have a very warped secularism also in India, which is not Pantha Nirpeksh, it's Pantha Sapeksh. We believe in Nirpekshta, na, we believe in Sapekshta. But the problem in India is Sapekshta is failing because monotheism does not believe in it. Monotheism can give you tolerance. We want mutual respect, which is where we need Nirpekshtas, because a society that has monotheism, even though it is a minority, it will have to be Nirpeksh, because monotheism is the problem. It is not us that is the problem. And I'm talking about monotheism, not monotheists. I'm not talking about the people. I'm talking about the meme itself.
Concept.
The meme itself is, the concept itself is problematic. And because that concept is problematic, you need Nirpekshta, because otherwise we don't know how to function. So that's what I'm trying to say. So I think India's message has to be mutual respect, reciprocity, Krishna's ahimsa, Mahavir, and we need to create that larger rubric where all these, I agree with what you have said, and then we have to present it in a new way. And I think it is happening its own way. There are multiple speakers, who are trying to present it in their own way. And I think we need to look outside and we need to stop being isolationists.
Right. I think we've also suffered the problem of packaging, right? Like somehow we've not packaged our culture in the right way. Of course, yoga, we are doing a good job right now, but otherwise, I think largely we've not done a good job of packaging it well. Lastly, I want to come to the question of where do you see the future outlook of Indic modernity, and also the fact that, there's a very interesting sociological difference in India, especially on the Indic wing, because largely this cultural civilizationalism has been an urban phenomenon, right? Because if you see the non-left in the West, it's all from the countryside. It's largely a countryside movement, and in the cities are more liberal and all of that. But in India, you have the unique phenomenon of this movement emerging from the cities and then going to the countryside. So, and the future is also an urbanizing kind of, more urbanization will happen and all of that. So what do you see the future of Indic modernity?
I think Indic modernity will only reach a problematic end if we don't urbanize and industrialize. So my concern is subject to a certain thing. If we don't industrialize and urbanize, then our society will reach most probably what wo economics mein kya kehte hain, the middle income trap or something of that sort, which they say Brazil has entered or something, some country has entered.
Correct.
My worry is that because If we do not have economic progress, we will not have societal progress, and modernity will get warped, and then people will start having disaffection with modernity, and then you will go back and revert back to those old clan based, group based societies. And so the test of India and the test of modernity lies in how well do we industrialize and urbanize. If we fail industrialization and urbanization in the next 50 years, I think Indic modernity will fail. And we'll revert back to, unfortunately, the worst side of our society. But I think modernity is doing fine in India. I think we are slowly but surely, the moral arc is expanding. We are going through, I mean, as of now, to we are. I think it, it, it is all subject to economic growth. I'm assuming the economic growth will stay. And if it will stay, I see a very healthy future.
Right. Cool. I think it's been a great conversation with you, Kushal.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed this chat. I think with that, we come to the end of the show. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us. Please do like, comment, share, and subscribe the channel. I will also be putting the link of my Substack, where I've written an article on Indic modernity and Hindu capitalism. So do check that out as well. With that, we come to the close of the show. Thank you so much.